He thought he had found love in a small town in Texas, but one night at a dance hall revealed the truth he was afraid to accept: betrayal, loneliness, and the cold alienation of those who were supposed to support him. He stood at a crossroads, to break down or finally allow himself to live openly. They say small towns never forget who belongs and who doesn't. I learned that the moment I stepped into the barn, the invitation had promised everyone welcome, but I felt the lie in my bones the second the fiddles started up, and the floor shook with boots that had known each other for decades. Laughter spilled across the room like it had a family tree, and I was the outsider standing at the edge, pretending not to notice the sideways glances that told me I'd never really belong. I hadn't even wanted to come. Jake, my boyfriend, the reason I'd left the city and followed him here, had insisted. "It's just a barn dance," he'd said, as if that explained everything. Music, drinks, fun. I told myself I could manage a few hours, maybe even prove to him and to myself that I wasn't some fragile transplant wilting in the Texas heat. But from the moment we walked in, Jake dissolved into the crowd. He shook hands, clapped shoulders, laughed with people whose names I couldn't keep straight. Not once did he think to pull me closer, to anchor me in the whirlwind of familiarity. I was just there, invisible. I lingered near the door, nursing a paper cup of cider, trying to mimic the easy smiles spinning past me. Couples twirled, friends stomped in unison, and I watched the kind of community I'd never been invited into. Then I spotted him, Jake, across the room. He wasn't looking for me. He wasn't even pretending. He was leaning in close to another man, broad-shouldered, grinning like they shared some private joke. Jake's hand brushed his arm and lingered, fingers curling in a way that didn't belong to friendship. The drink turned sour in my mouth. I set it aside before I could choke on it. My chest tightened, every beat of the fiddle digging deeper into the silence growing inside me. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Small towns thrive on casual touches, on warmth I hadn't grown up with. But I wasn't blind. I'd seen that look before, back when Jake still saved it for me. I stepped back toward the door, air burning in my lungs. Part of me wanted to storm out, slam the night behind me, let him explain himself later. Another part, the weaker one, begged me to stay, to wait, to pretend I'd misread everything. Because leaving would mean admitting I'd built my life on someone who might already have chosen someone else. That's when I noticed him. A man stood near the far post, apart from the crowd. He wasn't dressed up like the others, no forced shine to make him blend in. He leaned there steady, eyes locked on me. Not a passing glance, not idle curiosity. He was watching, really watching, like he saw every crack I was trying to hide. I froze. My instinct screamed to look away, but I didn't. Something about his gaze held me still. He pushed off the post and crossed the space between us, boots striking a rhythm quieter than the music, but louder than my thoughts. "Don't look like you're enjoying yourself much," he said. His voice was rough-edged but calm, not mocking, just true. "That obvious?" I muttered. "Only to someone who knows the feeling." His lips curled in the faintest smile, the kind you'd miss if you weren't paying attention. I should have shut it down. I had a boyfriend somewhere in this barn, even if his laughter belonged to someone else tonight. But the stranger's steadiness anchored me in a way Jake hadn't in months. I clung to it, even for a second. "I'm fine," I said too quickly. He tilted his head. That's the word people use right before they walk out and don't come back. The words hit harder than they should have. Maybe because they were true. Maybe because, for the first time all night, I felt seen. I didn't get the chance to answer. Jake's laugh rang across the room, louder now, brighter, directed at the man beside him. My throat tightened. The stranger must have caught the shift in my face, because his expression softened. He didn't press, didn't ask questions. He just said, quiet enough for me alone, "You deserve someone who doesn't make you wonder where you stand." It wasn't a flirtation. It was a simple truth, and it burned worse than the cider, because deep down I already knew it. I turned back toward the door, caught between flight and collapse. The music roared behind me. The dancers stomped. Jake's laughter rose again. And for the first time since moving here, I admitted it to myself. Maybe I wasn't losing him tonight. Maybe I'd already lost him a long time ago. The night air hit colder than I expected when I finally pushed through the barn doors. My lungs dragged it in like water after nearly drowning. Behind me, the fiddles carried on without me, laughter rolling across the wood like waves I couldn't stand against. I leaned against the rail outside, hands gripping rough timber until my knuckles ached. I told myself I'd stay long enough to breathe, then go back inside and play the part Jake wanted. Supportive, invisible, silent. But the truth pressed against my ribs. I didn't want to go back at all. Long night? The voice slid in low, steady. I turned and found him again. The man from inside, the one whose eyes had met mine and hadn't flinched. He stood a few feet away, posture easy, like he'd been waiting. I forced a hollow laugh. Is it that obvious? Only if you know the look. He stepped closer, not intruding, just enough that I could hear him over the noise from the barn. You don't have to pretend with me. I swallowed hard. No one had said that to me in months. With Jake, everything had been about appearances. Smile at the right time. Don't make things heavy. Never ask questions he didn't want to answer. Pretend it's fine, even when it's not. I shouldn't be talking to you, I said, though the words lacked conviction. Because you're with him? His tone held no judgment. Yeah. The words scraped out thin. I'm taken. He nodded once, slow. Then that's all I need to know. I expected him to walk away. Part of me wanted him to leave me to my misery. But he stayed, leaning against the rail a foot away, his presence solid and unhurried. He didn't push. He didn't ask. He just let me stand there without pretending. And that silence. God, it did more for me than Jake's laughter ever had. Inside, a cheer went up. My chest clenched before I even turned. But when I did, the sight gutted me. Jake in the middle of the floor, spinning with the same man I'd seen earlier. Their bodies pressed close, his hand sliding too easily to the man's waist. The crowd stomped in rhythm, but all I heard was the hollow thud of my heart breaking in plain sight. The stranger beside me must have seen it too. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. Don't let them see you break. I stiffened, fingers gripping the rail until splinters dug in. Why do you care? The words came sharp, fueled by shame and fury. You don't know me. He didn't flinch. I don't have to know you to recognize someone carrying too much alone. That cracked something I'd been holding together with tape and denial. The anger leaked out, replaced by something raw. I think he's cheating on me, I whispered, then corrected myself, voice breaking. No, I know he is, and I can't even bring myself to say it out loud without shaking. The man's silence wasn't empty. It was steady, patient. Finally, he said, sometimes the hardest part isn't seeing the truth. It's believing you deserve better than the lie. The words cut deep because they named the fear I hadn't dared voice. That maybe I didn't deserve better. That maybe invisibility was all I'd ever get. I laughed bitterly, wiping at my eyes. Deserve better? I don't even know what that looks like anymore. I've given him everything. Time, loyalty, trust. And all I've gotten back is scraps. The worst part is, I convinced myself scraps were enough. His eyes held mine then, steady and sure. I've been where you are. Gave everything I had to someone who never showed up for me. Thought if I held on tighter, they'd finally see me. They never did. It doesn't work that way. The confession landed like an anchor. Not pity, recognition. I swallowed hard. So what do you do? How do you stop waiting? You stop waiting, he said simply. You decide your heart's worth more than being someone's backup plan. For a long moment, we just stood there. My hands trembled against the rail, and without asking, he reached over and covered one with his. His palm was rough, warm, steady, not demanding, not pulling, just there, grounding me. It broke me in the gentlest way. My head tipped forward until it rested against his shoulder. His shirt smelled faintly of dust and cedar, real and honest. Nothing like the cologne that clung to Jake when he came home late. I let the tears fall, silent and hot, while the stranger stood solid and unshaken. When I finally pulled back, embarrassed by my collapse, he didn't let go right away. His eyes stayed on mine, calm, unflinching. You're not alone, he said quietly, even if it feels that way right now. The words lodged somewhere deep, where the lies Jake fed me couldn't reach. For the first time in months, I felt something fragile but undeniable. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't invisible after all. I told myself I could handle one more night, one more forced smile, one more excuse for Jake's distance. But denial is a fragile thing. It shatters the second the truth demands to be seen. It happened on a Tuesday. I'd gone to the diner just to get out of the house, to taste something other than silence and the weight of suspicion. Halfway down the alley beside the building, I froze. Jake was there, and he wasn't alone. He was pressed against the brick wall with the same man from the barn. Their hands gripped at each other like they couldn't wait another second. Jake's mouth was on his, hungry, careless, like I'd never existed. For a moment, the world just stopped. My body locked down to protect me from the shock. My feet refused to move. My voice refused to work. I just stood there staring at the confirmation of everything I'd been too afraid to admit. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It wasn't imagination. It was fact. I turned before the nausea could overtake me. My legs carried me away, stumbling down the street like I was running from my own life. I didn't stop until I collapsed onto a wooden bench by the courthouse square. Only then did I drop my head into my hands and let the ragged breath tear through me. Footsteps approached. Slow, steady. I braced for Jake, rehearsing the fight I wasn't ready to have. But when I looked up, it wasn't him. It was the cowboy, Liam. He didn't ask what happened. Maybe my face told him everything. Maybe he already knew. He just sat down beside me, the wood creaking under his weight, and stayed silent. That silence did more for me than words could have. Finally, I forced the confession out, voice trembling. I saw them, together, out back. He nodded slowly, not surprised, just steady. Like he knew I had to see it myself before I could believe it. The tears came hot and uncontrollable. I let out a broken laugh through them. You know what's messed up? I'm not even hurt because I lost him. I'm hurt because I gave him everything, every bit of loyalty, trust, time, and he never gave anything back. I've been fighting for something that died a long time ago. That's the cruelest kind of betrayal, Liam said quietly, when you realize you were the only one still holding on. His words hit like truth always does, sharp but cleansing. I looked at him then, through blurred vision, and saw in his eyes something deeper than sympathy, understanding. He'd lived this. He wasn't reaching down from safety, he was speaking from scars. I should hate him, I whispered. I should walk away and never look back. But part of me still wants him to see me, to realize what he's losing. That's just your heart talking, Liam replied. It'll take time for the rest of you to catch up, but one day you'll see he didn't deserve you at all. My hand trembled in my lap. Without hesitation, he covered it with his, warm and firm. Not pulling, not forcing, just steady. The contact anchored me when everything else felt like it was collapsing. Why do you keep showing up? I asked, my voice raw. His answer was simple. Because I know what it's like to sit on a bench like this and think you'll never be enough. Sometimes all it takes is someone sitting beside you to remind you that you are. The ache in my chest shifted. It didn't disappear, but it loosened just enough for me to breathe. For the first time since Jake's laughter at that barn, I didn't feel invisible. We sat there as the town moved around us, the quiet filled only by crickets and distant traffic. Liam didn't rush me. He didn't need to. His presence said enough. I wasn't alone anymore. Something shifted inside me that night. Not a decision. Those would come later. But a door I hadn't realized was locked creaked open, and through it, I saw the possibility of something I'd almost forgotten how to imagine. A life where being loved didn't mean disappearing. For days after the alley, I moved like a ghost. Jake came home late, smelling of whiskey and smoke, tossing excuses like crumbs on the table. He didn't know I'd seen him, or maybe he did and just didn't care. The silence between us thickened until even the sound of his keys dropping felt like a crack of thunder. I thought about packing up and leaving without a word, but running would have meant letting him write the ending, and I wasn't ready to give him that power. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. It was Friday, another town gathering at the barn. I hadn't planned to go, but Jake insisted, acting like nothing was wrong. "People will wonder if you're hiding," he said, almost daring me. I followed, not because I wanted to, but because something inside me needed the truth to breathe in daylight. Inside, the music thumped, boots pounded, voices rose in easy laughter. Jake slipped into his usual role, shaking hands, drawing attention, like he'd been born for it. But this time, I didn't linger by the door. I walked in beside him, my chest tight but my step steady. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. People had seen things, maybe not as clearly as I had, but enough to feed a rumor. Jake must have sensed it too, because when he raised his glass, his voice carried sharp and loud over the crowd. "Some folks been saying things about me," he announced, smile tight. "Ugly things. About loyalty, about where I spend my time. Well, let me tell you, when outsiders don't fit in, they like to stir up trouble." My stomach turned. Outsider. He meant me. Heads shifted toward me, eyes narrowing with curiosity. Heat crawled up my neck, but before shame could sink its claws in, something stronger rose. Fury. For months, I'd let him paint me invisible. Tonight, he was trying to paint me guilty. I stepped forward. My voice trembled at first, but grew sharper with each word. "Funny thing about outsiders. We see the truth because we're not blinded by old habits. I saw you, Jake. I saw you in that alley with him. Don't you dare stand here and call me a liar." The music stopped. The barn hushed into silence heavy enough to crush. Jake's grin faltered. "You don't know what you're talking about," he snapped. "You're twisting things because you can't handle small-town life." But people were already murmuring. Some looked at me with sympathy, others at Jake with suspicion. A few exchanged glances that said they'd suspected all along. Liam was there too, leaning against the far wall. He didn't move, didn't speak, but his eyes stayed locked on me, steady and unflinching. That steadiness poured into me like strength I hadn't known I had. "No," I said, clearer now, my voice ringing across the room. "I'm not twisting anything. I've spent months shrinking myself so you could shine. I gave you loyalty you didn't bother to return. And I won't keep standing here invisible while you blame me for your choices." The silence fractured. Someone near the back muttered, "He's right." Another voice chimed in, sharper. "We've all seen how you act, Jake." The tide turned fast. Jake's face darkened, but he couldn't claw the words back. His denial sounded weaker with every protest. The crowd shifted away from him, the shine he'd worn so easily slipping off in pieces. I stood taller, not because I wasn't shaking, I was, but because for the first time, I didn't care if they saw me break. What mattered was that I wasn't breaking alone. Jake tried one last jab, spitting the words like venom. "You'll regret this. Nobody here will ever see you as one of us." I met his glare. "I'd rather be alone and honest than surrounded and invisible." That landed harder than I expected. Jake shoved past the crowd and stormed out into the night, his boots kicking up dust in his wake. No one followed. The music didn't start again right away. People kept staring, whispering, recalibrating. Some nodded at me in quiet acknowledgement. Others turned away, unwilling to choose sides. But it didn't matter. For once, I wasn't hiding in the doorway. Liam finally stepped forward. He didn't say a word, just stood close enough that I felt the ground steady beneath me again. And in that barn, filled with eyes that once made me feel like a weed in their field, I realized something. Belonging wasn't about being accepted by everyone. It was about refusing to disappear for anyone. The barn doors closed behind Jake with a slam that rattled the silence he left behind. For a few long seconds, no one moved. Then conversations started up in low voices, the fiddles tried to recover, and the night staggered back into motion. But the weight of what had just happened lingered like smoke. I stepped outside before the music found its rhythm again. The air hit sharp against my skin, cool and clean compared to the stifling tension inside. I half expected my legs to give out. Instead, I found myself standing taller, breathing deeper, as though the truth I had carried alone had finally been set free. Jake didn't come home that night, or the night after. When he did show up, there was no fight, no dramatic plea. He just tossed his key on the counter and muttered, "Guess it's over then." That was it. Years of love, or what I thought was love, reduced to a shrug. It hurt less than I expected. Maybe because I'd already done my grieving in silence, or maybe because part of me knew I hadn't lost him that night in the barn. I'd lost him long before, when he decided my devotion was something he could take for granted. The weeks that followed were quiet, not the suffocating quiet I used to endure, but a space I began to fill with pieces of myself I'd forgotten. I woke early and walked through town without hiding behind Jake's shadow. I started talking to people, letting them see me without apology. Some still looked at me like I didn't belong, but others offered small nods, brief words of kindness. It was enough to remind me that being visible wasn't a curse. And then there was Liam. He didn't rush me. He didn't push. He showed up in small ways, leaning against his truck outside the feed store, nodding when our eyes met across Main Street, inviting me on walks without making it feel like more than I was ready for. His steadiness was the opposite of everything I'd grown used to. With Jake, I had always been chasing, clinging, trying to hold on. With Liam, I didn't have to. He was simply there. One evening he appeared at my door. "Barn dance tonight," he said with a half smile. "Thought maybe you'd want to come." For a moment I froze. The barn was the place I associated with betrayal, invisibility, humiliation. But then I realized his invitation wasn't about reliving that pain. It was about reclaiming it. "I'll go," I said. The place looked the same. Lanterns strung overhead, fiddles quick and bright, boots pounding the floor. But it felt different because I was different. I wasn't clinging to someone who refused to see me. I wasn't hiding at the edges, waiting to be invited in. I was there because I chose to be. Liam walked beside me, not guiding, not claiming, just matching my steps. When the music slowed, he extended a hand. "Dance with me." The words landed softer than any grand declaration, but heavier than anything Jake had ever said. Because it wasn't about pulling me into his world. It was about sharing the floor, sharing the moment. I took his hand. We didn't spin fast or stomp loud. We moved slow, steady, at our own pace. Around us, the crowd blurred into motion, but I barely noticed. All I felt was the warmth of his hand, the calm certainty in the way he guided without controlling. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't fighting to be enough. I was seen. When the song ended, we stayed close, not rushing apart. His eyes caught mine, gray and stormy, but softened with something new. "Sometimes it takes being broken," he said quietly, "to see where you're meant to fit." I let out a breath that felt like release. "I came here thinking I'd lost everything," I admitted, "but maybe this was what I needed to find myself again." He pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead, simple, grounding, without demand. A promise, not a claim. The barn roared with laughter and music, but for me, it wasn't noise anymore. It was possibility. I had walked in once as a shadow and left shattered. Tonight I stood in the same place, whole enough to believe in a future that wasn't built on scraps. Jake had lost his grip on me, and I had found something stronger than betrayal, the certainty that love doesn't make you disappear. Real love makes you visible.